Hey YouTube, welcome to the Bubba Continuum. It's September the 5th, 2023. It's a Tuesday. I know that because the dump is closed. Yesterday was Labor Day, and I tried to take my garbage to the dump, and I ended up taking it on a tour of the county and bringing it back home because it was Labor Day and I didn't know the dumps were closed. And I don't labor, so I don't know about these things. Very upsetting. Anyway, it's Labor Day Tuesday. I thought I would put up a video. Did I say welcome to the Bubba Continuum? I hope I did. I thought I'd put up a video, and I wanted to tell people about Singapore. I returned from Singapore like a week ago, and I spent a good deal of time there with my wife, our second trip to Singapore. And I wanted to let people know why Singapore is better than the United States. And I'm not saying it's a nice change, it's a good alternative. I'm just saying it's better. It's a better place to live. It's a better country. Sorry, I'm not that patriotic anymore. I mean, I obey the law. I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do, and I'm going to be loyal while I'm here. But I'm not out there waving the flag every day. I'm not one of these people. I don't say make America great anymore, because America's never going to be great again. We're done. We're washed up. This country has moved so far away from me. I'm like I'm like someone they're just waiting to deport, although there's nowhere to send me because I was born here. I saw something today about Burning Man, that stupid festival where people get together, perverts and drug addicts and so forth. They get together and make noise and make life miserable for some people in rural Nevada. And somebody called it a counterculture festival, and I thought that made me angry. I actually left a YouTube comment because that's not the counterculture. I'm the counterculture. I'm the counterculture. The counterculture is the left. It's the establishment, the liberal left. They now own the country as well as the entire West. And one of the ways you can tell that is that these people worship the government. When I was a kid, Vietnam was going on, and people who liked the government, and they'd say things like "America, love it or leave it." Those people were conservatives, and people who loved Russia, those people were on the left. And now leftists call us things like comrade, and if you put a comment up on Yahoo, they call you a Russian bot. And they use the word sedition, and they use the word treason. When I was a kid, if a leftist used the word sedition, they used it with a big sneer on their faces, like the idea that anybody could be patriotic and that trying to tear down the government could be a crime. That's just offensive. So it's weird, to see leftists now who love the government. They just adore it. I saw Jimmy Kimmel the other day talking about what a great patriot Dr. Fauci is, this guy who spread all this horrible misinformation about vaccines and masks and caused us so much trouble and caused kids to be held back, to be, I'm trying not to use the word retarded because that has a certain sound to it. Well, it caused them to be set back in school and socially and so on. He was talking about what a great American he was and how terrible it was to criticize him. And I was looking at him and I was thinking, am I dreaming? This is a comedian, and he's talking about this government shill. It's like watching somebody in the Soviet Union talk about Stalin in 1935. It's just unbelievable. So I'm the counterculture. I'm the counterculture. White, Christian, male, heterosexual, Y chromosome, which means I'm an actual male. If you don't have Y chromosome, you're not a male and you never will be. Sorry. I think I'm outside. I thought I'd take advantage of my farm. I don't know. Should I go back out or should I go back? Let's see. What is this thing going to do? It's going to do nothing. I've already got it. There we go. Oh, there I am in all my beauty. Oh, maybe I should go back. Yeah, let's go back. You don't want to see me that close. Anyway, I'm the counterculture. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So when you're in the counterculture, you're not that excited about you're not that excited about being an integral part of your nation. You don't want to get too caught up in it, because someday you might leave. Someday they might really turn on you. They are going to turn on us. They already have, but someday it's going to get really bad. And I just don't want to be part of that anymore. I'll obey the laws. If they go insane and they start drafting people my age, I'll obey the law or I'll leave. But that's it. You're not going to see me waving flags and talking about how great America is, because it's not true anymore. This place is nuts. We're going over to Africa and we're forcing Christian countries. We're not forcing them, but we're tying aid for the poor to the acceptance of perversion and insanity. These are Christian countries, and homosexuality and this transsexual business, all this stuff is evil. It's sinful, and it's very clearly contrary to accepted Christian doctrine that's been around for 2,000 years, and before that in Judaism. and they're pressuring, they're twisting the arms in these African countries. And a lot of it has to do with economics too. It's not just the fact that it's not just the cultural imperialism, but it's also economic imperialism. I hate to be, it's weird for me to be a conservative complaining about imperialism. But it's really true. The French are doing horrible things in Africa, and Obama's right there with them. I always thought Obama was an anti-imperialist, but he's not. He's an imperialist as long as he's the emperor, then the empire's okay with him. Anyway, I'm going way off track. I'm just saying I'm the counterculture now. You're not. If you're a leftist, you're not the counterculture. You're mainstream. You're a sheep. You're a good soldier. So if you think you're a rebel, boy, you are living in a fantasy world. You are the worst kind of conformist. You are the absolute worst kind of conformist. You think exactly like everyone around you. When you agree with the people who rule you and the people who pay your checks and the people who work around you, you never disagree. You're a conformist. Wake up. It's like these people in Hollywood. They talk, oh, I'm such a rebel. I'm such a nonconformist. Stick it to the man. And they agree with their bosses. They sleep with Harvey Weinstein, or they used to. They agree with everyone who signs their paycheck, and somehow they're brave. They take positions that guarantee that they'll continue to get jobs, and they say, look how brave I am. So, oh gosh, I've gotten so far off track. Well, okay, so we went to Singapore. And why do we travel so much? Because my wife is a Zambian, and she'll be here in the United States in a few weeks, and then she'll be here forever, because the way immigration works now, it's impossible to get rid of anyone. I don't know what she would have to do to get thrown out. It's kind of sad, she just walked across the border in Mexico. She could have been here 2 years ago, and she could have been here for the next 30 years. Nobody would have known any better, and they wouldn't have thrown her out at the end of it. But we did everything legally, like suckers. So there's this policy in the West, just about everywhere, not just the West, of keeping Africans out as tourists, as visitors. And you can't even go to China. I mean, that's how bad it is. Miserable destination like China, you can't go. Europe, you can forget about it. There's no way, except for Georgia, which is just barely Europe. It's east of the Caspian Sea, I think. I think you can go to Malta, or anyway, it's places where you don't want to go. Cyprus. All the destinations where they'll let her in without a visa are just pathetic. It's places like Bermuda and the Bahamas. And people love the Bahamas. People who sit in cubicles and when it's 0 degrees outside, they think the Bahamas are wonderful, but they're not. It's the most boring place on earth. My dad used to have this big boat. 2 bathrooms and 3 air conditioners, and we used to go to the Bahamas all the time and fish for dolphin and marlin, which we never caught, and we fished for snapper and grouper and stuff. And we had a great time and all that. But I'll tell you right away, I know the Bahamas, and there's nothing in the Bahamas except beaches, fish, drunkenness, and prostitutes. And if you don't have any interest in those things, there's no reason to go. I don't understand people who lie on the beach. Okay, it's fun to go out and paddle around the water for 15 minutes and you come in and go do something interesting, But just to lie there and fry, you must be the most vacuous person on earth to be able to put up with that, just so you think you can look a little bit better and then get wrinkles. People in Florida all look like alligators compared to people in Europe because our skin is destroyed. Anyway, that's the kind of place where she's allowed to go. Most of the Caribbean, we can go to Bolivia. Nobody wants to go to Bolivia. Bolivians don't even want to be there. So for some reason, she's allowed to go to Singapore and Hong Kong, which are pretty good destinations if you like the Far East. Singapore and Zambia have something in common. They were both founded in 1965. That's when the British finally gave up on Zambia. And it's kind of interesting. Zambia fought for independence, and the Singaporeans had it thrust on them. They didn't want it. They were part of Malaysia, and they were going to have race riots. They were having race riots. I shouldn't say they were going to. Singapore is like 75% Chinese, and on the one side there's Malaysia, and on the other side there's Indonesia. One's full of Indonesian Muslims, the other's full of Malaysian Muslims, and there were all these fears that there was going to be oppression of non-Chinese people in Singapore or something like that. So the Malaysians just threw them out, and now they want them back. They actually make noises about it. We should go take it back, because Singapore is filthy rich now. Singapore was poor. It was like Zambia. Zambia was like in a position to help out. Singapore was in such bad shape, that Zambia was like their big brother when these countries were formed, and now Zambia is still in the dirt, and Singapore is this phenomenal financial power. So that's why we went to Singapore. We can't just go wherever we want to. And if you try to go to Europe, they say, oh yeah, we're so open-minded, we're so liberal. and they, oh yeah, come on in, just file your application for a visa, we'll let you in. And then you file it, and they find something wrong. They will find something every time. So we can't just go to I'd like to go to Switzerland, I'd like to go to Italy, I'd like to go to Greece, places that I love, that I've been before. Can't do it until she gets a green card and moves here, because they think that she's going to stay there. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to pay for my wife to live in Switzerland for $10,000 a month. I don't think so, but you can't convince them. They have no common sense. She's got this giant ruby on her hand. Where did that come from? Did that come from, is that something people show up with when they're going to stay and work in car washes? No. But that's the situation. So we went to Singapore once before, and we really liked it, which is weird because you look around me. I live on a farm. I hate cities. I absolutely hate cities. I lived in New York. I lived in New York for 3 years. I lived in Miami for a very long time. And I just can't stand cities. I can't stand the way leftists control the places. I don't like the perversion. I hate the tension, the hatred, the rudeness, the racism. Miami is the most racist place on earth. It's like 70% Cuban, and Cubans, they hate Puerto Ricans. I mean, that's how you think Puerto Ricans and Cubans would be about the same thing. Cubans don't like Puerto Ricans. Hispanics have this idea that the closer you are to Spain, the more of a human being you are. So they sort of compete to see who's the least Spanish, And so they think that South Americans are like animals, and Cubans are, I think, marginally whiter than Puerto Ricans, so they're closer to the master race. And Cubans really don't like black people. I mean, they say, oh no, we're so integrated, and Batista was half black, and it's all, that they say that in public. Behind the scenes, believe me, I've heard the things they say. I had a friend who lived in Miami, black guy, applied for 27 jobs. Didn't get a single call back. Applied for 3 jobs in Orlando, which is not as backward, and he got 3 offers. So I don't like the racism in cities. I don't like the filth. I don't like the constant threat of danger. This is especially true in places like New York, where you are forbidden to defend yourself. You can't have a weapon. I mean, that's you can sort of get one if you jump through hoops long enough, but by the time you get the weapon, you'll be in debt and too old to care whether you live or die. So anyway, I hate cities. I really hate cities. I hate traffic. Miami sometimes has been, at various times, has been voted the city with the worst traffic in the United States. Sometimes Los Angeles wins. Can't stand the traffic. When I'm here and I have to stop at 3 or 4 lights, it's like a bad day for me if I'm on my way someplace. Miami's atrocious. The traffic is atrocious, and there's road rage. And if you have an accident in the ghetto, then there's a good chance you'll be beaten to death by a crowd. So cities are not my thing. They're just absolutely not my thing, and I'm so glad to be out of cities. And I was in Singapore, and I was enjoying myself so much. And Singapore is a city. You can ride a bicycle across it in a couple of hours probably. A little island in the middle of nowhere, and it's got these skyscrapers everywhere. It's got a subway. It's got buses. By the way, the landscaping is beautiful. I don't know what Asians do unbelievable things with plants. Singapore, it's like some rich person bought the city and paid gardeners to make the landscaping beautiful. I mean, it's not like New York where they throw up a crappy tree and everybody pees on it until it dies. It's just remarkable, the landscaping they've done there. Well, anyway, I was wondering, why do I like this place? Because I hate cities. You can't carry a gun in Singapore. There's so many things that are like, I'm carrying a gun right now. I always carry a gun in America. There's so many things about Singapore that you would think would make me hate it. And I finally realized I liked it because it's better than America. And I realized I don't hate cities, I hate American cities. And I can tell you about some things that would maybe help you understand that. Like when I lived in New York, the subways, when you went to the subway, before you even got on the subway, when you got close to the stairs that went down to the subway, you could smell concentrated urine just punching you in the face, like urine that had been there. Well, it's been there for 100 years, literally. Because people just go down and pee in the subway, and nobody cares. The restrooms in the subway, at least when I was there, always locked shut, or if they weren't locked shut, drug dealers were in there, and those were their offices. And if you went in, you could expect a beating or to get shot or something. There was always water that had urine and feces in it, like this deep around the restrooms. They were noisy. They don't give you any kind of hearing protection. The noise of a subway train stopping is eventually, if you listen to that every day, it's going to have an effect on your hearing. And they just let it blast through from one side of your head to the other. They don't care. They never have any maps. It's just a horrible place. And Singapore subways, they're air conditioned, escalators everywhere. They're efficient. Nobody gropes you. In New York, the subways, they're cleaner than New York subways. In New York, the subways have this film of skin film on them, like this oil that your hands produce in your body. You know, a lot of people in New York don't bathe very much, and they grab things, and you can feel this slimy oil. It's like vegetable oil, and it smells. It has this weird, rancid smell. It smells like, I don't know, naked people or something. And you get it on yourself whenever you touch anything. And it's not like that in Singapore. In New York, there's people jumping the turnstiles, muggers, gropers. There are bands of young minority men. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the truth. I mean, if it was a bunch of, you know, Hitler Youth-looking kids, I'd say so, but it's not. Running around accosting people, tormenting them. There are people who pretend to be entertainers, and they stand over you and do their stupid act, and then sometimes they make it clear that it would be a really good idea if you gave them a tip. You know, I mean, see if you can guess what that means. So I'm playing with the camera again. So New York subways are horrible, just like the rest of the city. And but Singapore subways are wonderful. I mean, it's so clean, so calm, so well run. Their buses are nice. When I came to this realization about how much better Singapore was than America, and why I liked it so much, even though it's a city, my wife and I were taking a walk. We were walking through Fort Canning Park, which is this urban park close to the capital stuff. And it's close to an area called Bras Basah. You'll never know where that is, but I'll just mention it. And I guess it used to be some kind of British fort because it's Fort Canning. And it's nicely landscaped, and there's a spice garden, and there's all these, and there's a college campus next to it, and it's just really pleasant, really neat. And we were walking through at night, and it was dark, dark, dark. And I guess it was around 9 p.m., something like that. And they were having some kind of festival, like Festival of the Night or something like that, they called it. And there were kids everywhere, people with their children. Nobody was rude, nobody was pushing anyone, there was no smell of urine. Nobody tried to sell us drugs, because in Singapore, you know, you die for that. They kill you for it. You know what? I have no problem with that. If you can't figure that out, then if you're not smart enough to figure out that you shouldn't sell drugs in Singapore, you're really killing yourself when you get executed. So I'm sorry, but you shouldn't do it. But God Himself has said in the Bible, you know, the people who deal in drugs should be killed. So I'm on His side. I'm not saying I advocate it, but I'm saying I'm not going to object to it. Anyway, it was just wonderful. You know, it was cool and pleasant. They had these things set up, these displays where they had picture frames set up, these big ornate picture frames, and they put them up with a plant behind them, some kind of tropical plant, and they would shine a projector on them. The projector would shine like a kaleidoscopic light show on the leaves, and it was kind of neat. And I was thinking, what if you tried to do that in New York? What if you tried to have a little display where you walked from one place to another? I mean, this was dark. There weren't a lot of lights. They don't have the crime lights that they have in New York or in America. What if you tried to do that? Well, they'd steal the picture frames, they'd steal the projectors, they'd beat up whoever was trying to set these things up and maintain it. They'd put them in the hospital or kill them. You just couldn't do this kind of thing. And if you took your kids there would be men in women's underwear walking around pretending to be women. There'd be all kinds of gay flags and sodomy flags, and there would be BLM painting everything. And you just couldn't take your kids there. There might be naked men walking around. You go to San Francisco, naked men walk around the streets now. A lot of people don't realize that because the press keeps it quiet. But you can get off the plane in San Francisco, go downtown, take all your clothes off, and just wander around. It's okay. So it made me realize how different the United States and Singapore were. That the United States, the Singapore was the way places are supposed to be, and the way. And even in America, there used to be cities like this where you could take your kids out at night and wander around. And there was no problem. And now in America, you can't even go to the beach because there may be naked people, and the law's on their side. It's just ridiculous. So I was thinking, you couldn't do this in America. There's no way you could do this. You'd have to have the National Guard out. I'm sure there's been events where some leftist has tried to make a point like, yeah, Cleveland's actually a really nice place. And they brought out private security and Blackwater and helicopters and, and giant lights to keep the criminals at bay for a couple of hours. I'm sure someone has done that, but in Singapore, it's normal. It's like every day. So I realized what a great place this was and what we have lost here. And it's so weird how my wife and I both times we've been to Singapore, we came home and we felt at home in Singapore. I feel more at home there than I do here. You could drop me there right now, and I could walk around and find my way. I know where to stay. I know where to get food. I can use the trains. I can use the buses. I can deal with the people. It's just the weirdest thing. Sometimes I think that God is preparing this place because America's done. It's done. It's going to get farther and farther to the left. And sooner or later, they're going to come to places like this because they know that people like me are thinking, ha ha, we're safe. But eventually, they're going to come to places like this, and they're going to jump the fence, and that's it. We're going to have to kill a lot of people or be killed. I mean, they'll find a way to take this place eventually. They found a way to take property in Cuba and Cambodia, and they'll do it here. I'm sitting here on this piece of land. There's no debt. All I have to do is pay the taxes and breathe, and it's mine. But they'll find a way sooner or later. And I kind of wonder, is God setting up Singapore as a refuge for people like me? Will people like me one day be refugees? And some people are already doing this. Like Jimmy Rogers, the financier, he moved to Singapore quite some time ago. He took his whole family because he said the West was washed up and the future was in Asia. I don't know if he was thinking about the civilization, the decency of the people, or if he was just thinking about economic opportunity. But either way, I think he was right. They have the funniest building over there. It's called the Marina Bay Sands, and it's what everybody thinks of when they think of Singapore. It's 3 tall hotels in a row, and they're all the same height. And on top of them, there's this thing that looks like the bottom half of a sub sandwich. It's supposed to be like a boat hull. And there's a pool up there and a bar and stuff like that. And everybody takes pictures of the Marina Bay Sands when they go to Singapore. And I thought how funny that was. It was like a metaphor because it was like the Trinity, God and Yahweh and Yeshua and the Spirit of holiness holding up the people who are going to be raptured above the flood, because the rapture is going to be like a flood. It's not going to be a literal flood, but it's going to be like that. The world's going to be drowned in violence and fire and so forth, and people who are with God are going to be lifted up. I thought how funny that was. So anyway, I've been thinking, my wife and I have been thinking the same thing. Maybe someday we'll end up moving to this place because the rapture won't come soon enough to save us from what's going on in America. So it's an interesting thing. I used to think America was great. I thought it was the greatest place possible, and I love the South. I love living in the South, and I wish I could stay here. But things are going to change. They keep changing. You don't want to be the Jewish guy who stubbornly stayed in Germany, because he had a good business going. You don't want to be the guy who tried to get out in 1941 instead of 1930. So anyway, I just thought I'd tell people there are places better than America. I used to say there was no lifeboat, but I don't know, maybe there are some lifeboats. Maybe there are some places where we can go when America collapses, and maybe Singapore is one of them. I know Africa, Christian Africa, I really don't want to live in Africa, but you could live in Africa and survive pretty well. As long as you have some retirement money that you can bring with you. Africa's not as crazy. Believe it or not, Africa's not as crazy as America now. They're resisting perversion. Very strange. We're really treating the Africans badly. Apparently Obama is pushing all kinds of economic and cultural imperialism, pushing perversion on these people that they don't want. And the French, they still have an empire. Nobody talks about it, but they treat people overseas like slaves. And that's what all this business in Gabon is about. The French are the reason we couldn't get out of Vietnam neatly. They wouldn't agree to decent terms because they wanted to hold on to their Vietnamese slaves. So they kept ruining the peace talks. A lot of people don't realize that. And now they've done their best to enslave Africans. And Africa's rich. It's full of minerals. It's full of gems. It's full of oil. And none of it stays there. It all gets taken out because there's still these places like France, that keep these people in bondage. So really interesting, really interesting. Maybe someday people like me are going to end up in Singapore for a while, and then maybe the rapture will come. And I would be comfortable with that because I am really no longer attached to the United States. I'm just not. I'll do what they say. I'll obey the law. I'll pay my taxes. But when the time comes to leave, I will not look back. So I don't know. Maybe you'll find this interesting if you're like me, if you're a counterculture member. Maybe it's something for you to think about when things start to turn sour. Maybe you should look at Singapore. Maybe you should look at Africa. Maybe some places will go under the waves later than others. So I hope this is interesting. See you in my next video.